Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to give you the nitty gritty details of downsizing and moving into a tiny house. So, if you're interested in going tiny, or maybe you're an empty nester trying to decide if you want to downsize to move to a smaller traditional home, this episode might be for you. I've been doing short 2-minute Tiny Talk Tuesday videos weekly for exactly a year now. And a lot of questions have come up during that time. And then also, my home was featured on the YouTube channel Tiny House Giant Journey. And with that, there was a lot of engagement, a lot of questions. I will put a link to that tour in the show notes. But in this discussion, I want to answer some of those questions and then also tie in how my need for connection played into my decision to live in the tiny home community where I am now. So, first thing to consider is, why go tiny? Why did I do that? I know that when tiny house living started gaining some momentum, we all tuned into the tiny house shows. And I guess I took it one step further because I really was considering one day moving into a tiny house. And the main reasons that I actually took the leap are financial. It is saving me money living here. I lived just south of Nashville, Tennessee, in a very expensive area and wanted to move to Austin, which is also expensive. So one way for me to be able to afford that was to go tiny. Then also, I just like the notion of leaving as little bit of a footprint as I can on the environment. So that was a consideration. And then also, I am about simple living. And so it made sense for me to pare down my belongings and live simply like I do now. So, if you're considering going tiny, I mean, there are so many options out there. Like, we can talk about different types of tiny homes. You could live in a van. My nephew lived in a van for a while. That would not be for me. I met a lovely couple, the videographer for the Tiny House Giant Journey video I just mentioned. He and his wife converted a school bus into their home, and they travel across the country with their 2 dogs and now their iguana. I'll have to link to them in the show notes as well. Roaming with Moose. Moose is one of their dogs. They have got this down to a science. Their bus is really, really neat. And so they live that way. People live in mobile homes and, the tiny home on wheels. I chose a tiny home on a foundation. It's anchored into the ground. It was what worked for me. I do travel, but I travel in my car, and I wanted to be more settled and have a home base for when I do travel and have it be in one location. And also, I'll talk about the community, but I wanted to be able to be rooted in a community as well. So if you're downsizing but not considering a tiny home, then you can consider, do I want to go to an apartment? Do I want a condo? Or do I just want a smaller house? So all those are considerations for if you're deciding to go tiny. Then another thing is the location. So I do know people who will purchase land and put a tiny house on that land, and that works for them. For me, I needed connection, and I had not really been rooted in community as much in the past, and I was looking for that. And then also connection to nature. So my sister found the place where I live, which is Village Farm, Austin, 3 or 4 years ago, when she knew that I was looking to go tiny. Eventually, she found this place, and she knew that I would like it because it is an agrihood. That is a community that's built around agriculture. And in this case, it's an organic farm. And so I came to visit 3 years before I ever bought the house, and just fell in love with the community and love that there's a farm right here on the property. And on Saturday mornings, I can walk out my back door and go to the farm stand. We also have built a community garden, so I have a plot there. So for me, community was important. Connecting with my neighbors, actually being a part of a community was really important to me. And then also the agrihood. Those 2 boxes checked for me. Connect to nature, connect to other people. So for a lot of people, though, that might not be important. So you just have to consider what works for you. Another thing about a tiny home community, or anywhere, like if you take a mobile home and you park it somewhere, there's going to be a lease fee. I don't own the land where my house sits. I lease it. And when I consider my expenses, so the advantages of that are, everything's already set up. You've got the water, you've got the electric, all of that is already set up. And then I pay a monthly lease for the land. So the monthly lease is just under $800. So my total expenses, including water, gas, electric, and my internet, comes to about $1,000 a month. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how much mine costs because I actually own my home. I don't have a mortgage on it. One thing that you want to consider, of course, before you move is square footage. And though my house is a tiny home, it's 399 square feet. And you'll see a lot on tiny house shows, 200 square foot homes. And you'll see families living in them. I don't know how they do it. That's not for me. I live alone in my 400 square feet, and it works really well for me. The other thing is I do have a loft. My bedroom is downstairs, and if you watch the tour, you'll see this. But I do have a loft, and that works for me to have one loft. There are homes in this community that have two, and I'm claustrophobic, so I have to have the high ceilings, and there's actually a high ceiling in my bedroom as well. One thing that I would encourage you to do if you're considering downsizing or going tiny is actually log for a couple of weeks where you spend your time in your home. And I think for those of us who have lived in larger homes, one of the things that I noticed about how I lived was there was a lot of space that I wasn't actually using regularly. So if you put pen to paper and really write it down, you might see that you're not using all of your space. If you're using all of your space, great. Why move? But if you're looking at going smaller, that's something that you can do to really get a grasp on what space you're actually using on a regular basis. Another thing I did is what I call incremental downsizing. So I lived in a 3-bedroom townhouse that had a garage and an attic. And it was about, I think, 1,700 square feet. And I downsized and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment that was 1,100 square feet. And in that process, I got rid of maybe a third to a half of my belongings. And then that set me up. I lived there for a couple of years, and that set me up for being able to downsize further. So if you're not sure, if you really want to go tiny, I would recommend that because then you get to see for a time how you do with less space. And if you really do feel like you can make that leap to go truly tiny. Another thing to consider is storage. Of course, we all talk about storage. A lot of the people in this community have very creative storage solutions. Mine are pretty simple. I do things like I have a pantry, and so I have an entire shelving unit that's mounted on that pantry door. So when I open it, I have additional storage. I use my oven to store my pots and pans because I rarely ever use my oven. I use my refrigerator because it's a full-size refrigerator and I'm one person, so I have extra space in it. I use the refrigerator for storing some empty things like glass jars. I use curtains. So in my loft, I have an area where I store Christmas decorations or things that belong to my children or sentimental items that I don't need all the time, but I want to have. I don't want to get rid of them, and I'm not going to pay for a storage unit. So I hung curtains around it to sort of separate that. And there are just little things like that. And another thing is just looking up, mounting things on the wall. There are a lot of creative storage solutions that you can look into if you're looking to go tiny and want to make sure that you have space for everything. Another consideration is, of course, cost. I bought my tiny home as a resale, and it was also furnished, though I've replaced some of the furniture. It had all my appliances, furniture, and it was $130,000, which is a little bit high if you're looking at the range, I guess it's more on the high end. You can find a tiny home for $30,000 or you can find a tiny home for $250,000. It just depends on what you're looking for. When you're looking into what type of home you want, there are so many options out there to consider. I was very happy with what I chose as a resale unit. Been incredibly happy here, so that's what worked for me. Another thing to consider is if you're downsizing, period, you have to consider, am I really willing to pare down my belongings? Am I really ready to let go of things? Because it does require a commitment to that. And I mentioned earlier, I don't have a storage unit. That was never a consideration for me. But for some people, they have a storage unit, and especially if they're not sure if they're going to stay there forever and that they might choose later to go to a bigger location, then it's nice to have those things in storage. But again, it's about really considering how I am when it comes to letting go of things. Am I really, really ready to do that? So those are just some things to look at. If you're thinking about going tiny, I will say a little bit more about my experience. What has worked well for me is that I have pared down my belongings enough that I pretty much know where everything is and I'm real comfortable here. And so I don't waste time looking for things. I don't need as much as I thought I did. In fact, there's plenty more that I can get rid of and plan to in the near future. Again, community is important to me. I am in a location where I know my neighbors. I'm close to my neighbors, and a lot of people don't like that. I do. It's worked well for me, and I like knowing my neighbors, and we support each other, and that has been really nice. And then the other thing I mentioned was nature. Being right next to the farm, being able to go and dig in the dirt is very, very important to me, and it fulfills me. So I will say that even though I downsized and I let go of the larger space and chose the smaller space, it feels very expansive to me. My life feels very abundant, and I am extremely happy with my decision. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of things to consider if you're looking to downsize, and I will see you guys next week. Before I let you go, if today's conversation stirred something in you, I want you to know there's a place to go deeper. I work with a small number of women privately through my Connected Simplicity coaching. 90 days together, where we move beyond the outer simplicity and start doing the inner work, the connection to yourself, to others, to nature, to something greater. If that's resonating, I would love to have a conversation with you. You can find details in the show notes or reach out to me directly on Instagram. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I would so appreciate it if you would review, rate, or share it with one woman who you think would benefit from it. Until next time, live simply and connect deeply.